Okay, so Ricky's been involved in a lot of work with this, really.
Please. I'm moving to move it. Sorry about that.
Expensive equipment. So Ricky's been involved in a lot of work with us over the last couple of years, supervising mapping projects, and recently an ESCInd project. We're due to start on another one this summer as well. So I'm going to talk about some of the work that the BGS is involved in.
Okay. Hi everybody. So thanks, Paul. Just while this is loading up, I'll just tell you a bit about myself. So the presentation itself is going to be in a couple of parts. I'll tell you about BGS in general, what we do, and then I'll just talk about the projects that I've supervised with Paul over the last year or so. Let's go. So yeah, I've worked at the BGS since 2001. I was a fresh face straight out of Nottingham University. I'm not a geologist by background, more of a data person, GIS, 3D visualization, 3D geological modelling. So I've constructed geological framework models in the shallow subsurface, deep subsurface, overseas, all over the place. And more recently, the last 5 or 6 years, I've got into more kind of virtual reality, looking at 3D visualization of geology and all of the kind of geoscience data that you can get. And very recently, the last year or so, I've been looking more into augmented reality, looking at HoloLens and that kind of thing. So the BGS has a turnover of about £50 million. About 50% of that comes from NERC, the Natural Environment Research Council. So we do science budget, maintain national data sets, for example. Approximately half of that is won through selling data or actually doing commissioned research. And this could be anything from constructing a geological model of a certain area to doing a kind of geochemistry baseline survey of somewhere. So I'm just going to flick right to the top of this diagram. Well, essentially, I'm just going to pick out a few examples from this diagram. Yeah, we have lots of research themes at BGS. We do a bit of everything, to be honest. So, like Adrian was talking about earlier, we've got our own laser scanning team. They do everything from monitoring coastal erosion again, but that kind of feeds into kind of EU climate change models. We've got our own Earth observation team, so we do our own interpretation of landslides, landslide events, even in the UK and overseas as well. We have our own groundwater team, looking at everything from shale gas. So, for example, we look at the separation of aquifer units to the shale gas source rocks and see if there's any potential for groundwater contamination. More recently, we've been looking at radioactive waste disposal. So we're working with radioactive waste management. It used to be the NDA, doing a kind of national screening project, actually, looking at where we could dispose of nuclear waste in the subsurface. In the shallow subsurface, we've got the engineering, geology and infrastructure team. So they do things like shallow geophysical surveys, ERT, for example. They look at leachate movements in landfill sites, or they look at slow-moving landslides. We even use kind of persistent scatter interferometry. We're looking at ground motion in cities, and they're all the kind of, we work cross departments. So my own team's called geoanalytics and modelling, and in that team we develop software essentially. We develop software in the systems that you guys can use and people within BGS can use to actually augment their studies. And we work with lots of different partners in the industry. So we work with consultancies such as AREP, AECOM. We work with academia like yourselves. We've got our own kind of initiative, the BGS University Funding Initiative, to actually support MSc and PhD students. We are primarily a government organisation, and actually I'll just read it straight from, so I'm not going to get it wrong. So we are the UK's premier provider of objective and authoritative geoscientific data, information and knowledge to help society to use its natural resources responsibly, manage environmental change and to be resilient to environmental hazards. We're a public sector organisation and we cover literally all aspects of geoscience, as well as providing impartial geological advice to industry, academia and the public. So that's quite important. That last sentence is that we are impartial. We don't have any vested interests as such, but we are a government agency, so you can make your own mind up. Yeah, and we have offices all across the UK. So I'm based at the head office in Keyworth. There's approximately 600 staff across these offices, but there's about 450 in Keyworth, which is just south of Nottingham. We've got offices in Edinburgh, Cardiff, Belfast and Wallingford. We've even got an office within the Natural History Museum. We've got 2 people who work in that place. And we are the national custodian of lots of geological data as well. So we're talking about boreholes, site investigation data. We're also talking about borehole core as well. So we've got all the core from Sellafield, Nyrex and that kind of thing. We've got the National Isotope Laboratory at the BGS. It's affiliated to the BGS. And we've got our own geotechnical and geochemistry laboratories as well. So we cover a wide range of disciplines. So that's a little bit about the BGS, and you can ask me at lunch more about the BGS if you want to. There's lots of information on the website. Right now I'm just going to take you through a few videos and demonstrations of the kind of tools that I use and you could use and students could use to actually do their projects. So one of these is the Geology of Britain viewer. This is actually the 3D beta version. And this project here actually is a project I've worked on. It's called UK 3D, and it's a set of national cross sections that crisscross the country, go from about 1.5 to 6 kilometres in depth. In this, we're just showing you some kind of 3D representation of the geology. So I'm going to talk about it a little bit later on, and Paul has alluded to this already, geovisually, but we can have a look at the geology in 3D, which is really important to understand the way that the land has evolved and the subsurface has evolved. As you can see, we're just using a quite low resolution digital terrain model here. So I think it's the OS Open 50 meter, and we're looking at the 1 to 50,000 scale geology. So we maintain baseline data sets in the UK. One of those being the geological map at different scales. So we've got 1 to 10,000, 1 to 50,000, 1 to 250,000, 1 to 625k, which is our national scale. I talked a little bit about hazards, but we do, as well as the kind of more niche hazards such as sinkholes, which are gaining more popularity, we look at earthquakes, landslides, volcanoes. There we're just showing you all the earthquake foci across the UK. And then we've got this, these are borehole scans, I think. We're going to look at it shortly. So yeah, if you zoom into a certain level, you can start to see the boreholes that we hold in our database. So we've got over 1.2 million boreholes in our database, but I think that's only probably 20 or 30% of what's out there, in fact. And each of these boreholes are linked to a borehole scanning as well. So you can actually see the original interpretation by the loggers or the geologists on site. Well, actually, while we're here, I'll just show you the 2D one. So many of you are probably aware of this already, but I think it's worth pointing out. So if you go into this page, you've got the Geology of Britain view of 3D, but you can also look at the 2D version. If I just zoom somewhere, let's just zoom to the West Midlands somewhere. So now we're going from different scales of visible geology. You can look at the bedrock map only, or you might just want to look at the superficial geology. And you can click on that to find out what the superficial geology is. So we provide lots of information for free because we are a government organisation. And now you can see the borehole scans. So if you click on any of these borehole scans, you can actually view the scan online. This is just a trial pit. So you can see these are split up by different depths, so I could go to a different one, let's say 30 meters plus. And some of these have many pages associated with them, so you might get a bit of the site investigation information as well. There's nothing on that one. Anyway, so that's the principle there. You can actually click around and actually get an idea of what the geology is in your site, depending where you are. There's not necessarily borehole information everywhere, so you're going to get a lot of borehole information within urban areas and along kind of roads and infrastructure. In the rural areas, you won't get that information. So that's when you probably have to go to something like the Geology of Britain Viewer 3D to actually interpret the landscape. If I just zoom out a touch, one of the things I've added to in this Geology of Britain Viewer is this 3D models layer. So we just got some example models here. I'm just going to go, let's just go to the Isle of Wight. You can actually select it from a list. And in here we can drill synthetic boreholes, cross sections, and do horizontal slices through the geology. And we're only showing you a snapshot of all the models we have in the UK actually. So we've got most of the major cities covered and large regional models for the rural areas. But you can drill boreholes, synthetic boreholes in here. So synthetic borehole is basically taking an interpolation from the geological model we've created, and it gives you ideas of thicknesses and what geological units exist in the subsurface. But you could also do a cross section, so I'll do one over the Isle of Wight. And this will take a few seconds to generate. So now you can see the big fold in the rocks there, and you can see what kind of rock structures are in this geological model. So this is quite a low resolution model. We have higher resolution models in, say, London, but again it gives you an idea of what's happening, the geology, how it's evolved. Again, there's borehole scans, surface geology, so that's all freely available to use, and you can use it on your phone as well, or your iPad. You can use it in the field. Just going back to the presentation. So as far as data goes, we will, particularly with academia, we will give as much as free as possible, even if it's commercially sensitive. You can sign agreements and we can let you use that data for your own projects. So sometimes it's just good to talk to us in that respect. The next bit I want to talk about is some software we have called BGS Groundhog Desktop. This is a software we've developed in-house over the last 2 or 3 years, and it's basically to enable anybody, because it's a free open software, it's enable anybody to construct their own kind of conceptual geological model. It has lots of web map services already inbuilt, so you can get web map services to the BGS Bedrock map, for example, the 1/50K. So this is like your GIS window where you would compile all of your kind of GIS data, and it helps you do that kind of desktop study before you go out into the field. So now we're looking at some AGS boreholes. So these are geotechnical boreholes, and you can actually visualize these boreholes in a borehole window, which I'll show you shortly. But you could also input your own boreholes. So I already showed you the Geology of Britain viewer, so you could actually digitally transcribe boreholes from the scan into the system through a spreadsheet, or you could do it in the system itself. So you could actually produce your own borehole templates using this software. So it gives you can do deviated logs if you wanted to, or you could do, like say, these kind of geotechnical style logs. So what they're doing is just altering the log window so that you can see the actual geological description of that AGS borehole. And this is where you could interpret your own boreholes, particularly if they've only got a lithological description. And these boreholes, we've spent a lot of time actually developing this borehole interface, so it could be actually used professionally to give to clients. And part of the project, which I got Constance Martin to do, was actually code a lot of boreholes. You into the system, and I'll show you why shortly. So you can actually alter the intervals and add intervals on the log itself using this, or you could do something in a database or Excel and then incorporate all the boreholes that way, whatever's quickest and easiest for you to do. So you've seen the borehole window, there's the map window there with all the boreholes. This is an example from Knowsley. You can add your own DTM. I mean, you could get that from the EA LiDAR now, because that's all freely available, up to 2 meters. Although they do have 50 centimeter, 1 meter resolution as well. And now you can construct your own cross sections. So it could be between 2 boreholes, or it could be a conceptual section where you have no boreholes. You can see actually the map line work as ticks, the crop lines. What these are showing surface crop and subcrop as well. And it's really easy to draw and add your own units into this to draw your own cross sections. So what I'm trying to say here is that a lot of this could be used before anybody goes out in the field for the traditional mapping. They could use this to get a conceptual understanding of what's happening. In this case, this project that I worked on as well was for Knowsley, so they wanted to identify where the sewage pipes were in relation to the subsurface aquifer. So it's the Sherwood Sandstone aquifer, but there's a big thickness of tilde clay unit. So we could identify where the sewage pipes were in relation to the aquifer, where they're in the till, where they're in the aquifer itself, and the distance from the aquifer itself. So they could plan and remediate those pipes and sewage pipes. So yeah, this is how the Knowsley model was actually built up. So this is exactly what Constance Martin did, a student, undergrad student last year with us. But she did it for the City of London, which I'm going to go on to shortly after this one. So this is the what we call like a fence diagram, so it's interlocking cross sections. From that you can calculate through whatever interpolation you like. In this case it was just a tin triangulated regular network, but you could use any kind of interpolation to start calculating these kind of units. So we're looking at the Sherwood Sandstone aquifer. We actually were able to model where the Sherwood Sandstone was weathered. You can see the till now, the peats, the blown sands, and the alluvium, and lots of made ground, so artificial ground. And that builds up your kind of 3D map, your 3D geological model. So this is what Constance Martin did for us last year. So Constance did a complete desktop study of an area of London. So she didn't actually go and map any of that, but she was able to construct a 3D geological map using the software that I've just showed. So the area was City of London, the borough of City of London. And you can see the red cross sections are those that are already existing in the BGS geological model, but the spacing of those cross sections were probably about 1 kilometre. And then you can see all of the boreholes that she coded in green and the borehole locations that are shown in green. And then you can see a much denser network of cross sections in blue. So she did her own kind of fence diagram, and she did all of this within Groundhog Desktop. It's only when you get to the 3D stage of actually calculating the model, she had to come back and actually calculate the model to get the visualization that I'm showing you now. So then you just see some of the superficial deposits there, the terrace gravels, the Langley silt, for example. And then you can see the tertiary units underneath that. So you've got the London clay, the Lambeth group, the Thanet sands. And these are all really important kind of geotechnical issue. Well, sorry, I'll just go back a step. It's important to know where the Lambeth group is in particular in this area because of the issues it causes in construction, because the London clay is really homogeneous, it's just a stiff clay, and much of the London Underground is built within that unit. But then you've got the Lambeth group underneath that, which is really variable. And it's got perched aquifers, it's got sand units, gravel units, and clays all intermixed. So actually understanding where that Lambeth group is really important, especially to the tunnelling engineers and those who are building their 6-storey basements down in Kensington. This fits into this kind of workflow that we've developed recently, over the last 5 years or so, this kind of digital mapping / modelling workflow. So what I showed you on the left there, the pre-field activities, that is doing all of your kind of desktop study, your conceptualisation of the geology. That's the kind of bit I help out with a lot with the students that have come to us before. More recently, just 2 weeks ago, there's some students doing some mapping in Birmingham, so they used all of that software and data that I showed you to do a kind of conceptual desktop study. And then you can do your field studies, so you can still actually improve your conceptual model in the field. So you can take a laptop away and actually draw further cross sections, or you can draw map line work in the grounded desktop system as you're going along. So it shouldn't be totally kind of isolated, it should be done together. And the one software I'm going to show shortly is GeoVisually, a video of that, and that should run alongside that, but that's essentially looks like the Geology of Britain 3D viewer, visualising geology in 3D. And then your post-field is actually finalising your conceptual model by adding all of that field information into the software to produce your geological map. And that just goes through what I've just said, essentially, just virtual field reconnaissance, this VFR that we call it. So you do all your data compilation within these kind of 3D systems. This is GeoVisually, a slightly older version, looking at the slide. But this allows you to interpret the landscape. You can identify breaks of slope, you can do gradient measurements and that kind of thing. You can also plan your routes, so it's more that where can you get access to, what kind of vegetation is going to be in a way, and that kind of thing. And you can assess the existing geological data, the existing geological map. There might be areas in which this is a bit shaky. Especially, some people take for granted actually, the Geology of Britain viewer, because all the maps digital, you think it's done in the last 20 years, but in fact some of the maps are over 100 years old in that Geology of Britain viewer, so they're quite outdated, using different standards of maps and all sorts. So yeah, then you start to look at the geology in 3D, looking at the breaks of slope again, seeing how shaky it looks against the Ordnance Survey maps, for example. And you start to do feature mapping. So we do a lot of our geological interpretation looking at features in the landscape. Like I said, breaks of slope. And this system as well, so Ellis used this, is that you can actually draw onto the landscape. You can draw your own geological boundaries. This is just about the field campaign. We've got our own system called BGS Sigma, which uses these tablet PCs, but I know through the field course here that it's more paper based, but this is the system we used. And the great thing about this system is it makes sure everything's consistent. So when we feed everything back into the database, everything's got the same name, the same kind of colour and that kind of thing, the same kind of symbology. So everybody could use it to create their own geological map further down the line. And then the post-field campaign, this is when you're analysing your map line work against the existing data again. And you're coming together, so we traditionally work in teams of geologists, so we're edge matching all of the time to make sure we get consistent line work across many map sheets. And you can look at slope maps and that kind of thing to see if your interpretation matches. And one of the great things about using these kind of VR systems, the 3D systems, is all about communication. So actually describing to the public or stakeholders what geology really is and what's happening in the subsurface. And these slides are just showing you what we can load into this geovisionary software. So we're not restricted to DTMs and map drapes, so we can load in deviated boreholes, geophysical wells, for example. We can load in sensor data, so a big kind of key push in the BGS strategy at the moment is instrumenting the environment. So we're looking at ways in which we can put as many sensors into the subsurface as possible, and we've got two big projects, one in Thornton in Cheshire and one in Glasgow, where we're going to be doing this, a big kind of multi-million-pound capital bid. This is sensor data from the Environment Agency, loaded into the geovisionary software that I talked about. You look at flow rates and you can see where these are flood warning layers, in fact, across the UK. We can load in CAD models, so you're looking at building models as well. This gives you the kind of scale and context, particularly if you're talking to non-geologists. SegWire data, seismic data again. You can look at geological surfaces, look at how they're faulted and folded. You can load in seismic cube data. And you're not restricted to just the UK, it could be anywhere in the world where you have DTM data, and so you've got SRTM data you could use in Iceland, for example, or the UAE, or wherever you want to work. We've even worked on Mars. There's even data for that. So, and we do a lot of stuff that goes from onshore to offshore. So we're not only just onshore based, we're offshore based as well, looking at shallow geohazards, mapping offshore, for example. Again, this is a point cloud of York, in fact. So we can incorporate point clouds of hundreds of millions of points into the system, but also load in the context with the geology as well. And this is just the Thornton site, in fact, so we're doing kind of highly detailed characterization of the site, and we're doing lots of planning for boreholes at the moment. So we're going to put down about 30 to 40 boreholes in that area. And I'm just going to finish on this little clip. I actually I don't put much stuff on Twitter, I'm a bit lazy actually, but I put this one on Twitter, and this got like 1,500 views within a week. It's a bit shaky. So this is, I might play it from the original. This was by Ellis Hammond. See if it's still shaky. And this is within the geovisionary software. So actually Ellis Hammond did the conceptual section within Granold Desktop, and we exported it to this software. It's in Ogwen in North Wales, there in Snowdonia. So I think he just had an old geological map to go from. So he did a conceptual cross-section, and you could actually see where all of the surfaces had been eroded. So that's the old geological map he used. And you can see how you can fly around the landscape. So we've got national coverage for data. And now you can see the actual geological cross-section that he constructed and correlated within Granold Desktop. So you can see the folding, the synclines and anticlines in those structures. So yeah, I'll finish on that, but just from my own perspective with the students we've had so far, I mean, I like the projects to be student-led. So I like to give them all the information and data and technology, software to help them do what they need to do. But from my own personal experience, I want them to lead the project, and I can help them along. But it's gone well so far, and we can talk about that later on anyway. Anyway, thanks for listening. Cheers.
Really good examples there of projects. We had the University of Birmingham students at the last one. Ellis, that was an ESCInd project here recently completed.
Yeah, you did look at the kind of use of geovisionary for kind of education, looking at the landscape in 3D and how that augment the traditional methods of teaching geology. Or maybe we're giving away too many answers.
So we'll break for lunch now. Lunch has just arrived at the back. So come back at about 2:15. Feel free to help yourself to tea and coffee at the back there too.